So good morning, everybody. Thank you, all department heads, supervisors, our treasurer, Mike Genito, for coming to this morning. This meeting is designed as a working meeting, as there has been many questions and concerns about our budget going forward. Obviously, great concern, very serious matter, with a tentative of 22, which reflects the true expenses of the village before any cuts were made. And it was the board's job now to take the public hearing portion of the budget, which we have already concluded, in addition to getting our own knowledge from within the department heads, working with the department heads, trying to cut down the tax increase. I just felt that we were having meetings that were not productive. Therefore, I felt that a meeting of all of the minds was necessary. I know Trustee Markunas had requested a meeting this morning with Mike Genito to sit down with more questions. Frank Hagen had submitted some questions. I just felt that it was more productive to get everybody in the same room instead of one trustee meeting with the treasurer or myself, and then not the rest of the board not benefiting from that information. So it's really important that we work together as a team. So I felt as though this morning this is a working meeting for us and for you. I have asked that all of the department heads take another look at their budget and make some additional cuts. I had asked for a 10% cut in every department. Most departments, with the exception of the fire department, who I'm still working with. I had a meeting with them the other evening, and Mike and I are continuing to work on their budget. He has a preliminary number for us today in cuts, but advised me this morning that he's still working on some additional cuts in their budget as well. We also have a couple of numbers that were not reflected in the draft of proposals for the cuts in the budget. We are now down to 18.6. And there is still a few things that are not in there that we have to put in that will be reflected in that as well. So at the moment, we're at 18.6 with a few items that we don't have in the budget, and then anything that we can come up with this morning. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Genito, our treasurer, so he can explain the process a little bit more fully, so there's an understanding of our employees, as well as the board, and as well as the residents who have come out this morning to attend. So,
Mayor,
yes.
if I may, before Mr. Genito goes forward, I would like to make a short comment regarding the meeting and the time and the decision process that was made behind it. Although I fully agree with you, the urgency of the meeting and getting the department heads together and working as a working budget, I feel that the residents of the village definitely should have been included with more of a time frame that's convenient for them to attend this meeting, so they're aware of the urgency and the necessity of the meeting to move forward and have them participate.
Okay, and as I explained to Mr. Markunas in several emails back and forth, the reason that we're having this at 10 o'clock in the morning is because our supervisors are in their normal workday. There is no overtime incurred. Mr. Genito was going to be here during day hours today, and I did not feel that it was in the best interest of the budget to present a time where the treasurer was not available. Therefore, I did also propose that we have a meeting at 7 o'clock tonight to go over what we have discussed today and the work that we have done. I did not get any feedback from you, and I was perfectly ready, willing, and able to put a meeting together at 7 o'clock tonight to bring forward anything we've discussed today. But unfortunately, no one took advantage of that, so here we are.
You know, I'm just a little upset that the village residents are left out of the process, Mayor.
Okay.
You know, I'm not arguing with you, but the last time the feedback from the village residents was so negative that the meetings were held at 10 a.m. I still feel that it's unfair to the village residents.
Okay, this wasn't
That's
designed
all.
as a public meeting for
Okay.
public participation. It was designed as a working meeting.
Correct.
For us and the employees who prepare their budgets for us. Had it been a public comment portion, I certainly would have done it when it was a time where the residents could be here, but we've already concluded our public hearing, and now we need to work, and that's what I'm here for today.
Correct.
So if we cannot spend any more time
Okay.
on that, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to make the board aware of the process and how we go forward, and some things that are very important for you to consider as you look to adopt the 2015-16 budget. The tentative budget that you have before you was published and made available March 20th of 2015, and to date, I'll say it again. The 2015-16 tentative budget was published and made available on March 20th of 2015. And to date, no changes have been made by resolution of the village board. The village board must be aware, or should be aware, that only those changes that are adopted by the village board to the tentative budget will be official changes to that tentative budget. The 2015-16 budget must be adopted on or before April 30th of 2015. And if the real property tax levy exceeds 1.68%, which is the cap, I know it's been referred to as a 2% cap, but it's actually 2% or the rate of inflation, which is ever is lower. And the state has advised us that the rate of inflation for this forthcoming budget is 1.68%. So if it exceeds that tax levy, 1.68% more than the 2014-15 levy, the village board must adopt a local law that overrides the tax levy cap before adopting the 2015-16 budget. We fully anticipate that the tax levy will exceed the tax cap of 1.68%. Now, should the village board fail to adopt the budget on or before April 30th, 2015, the 2015-16 tentative budget, along with any changes adopted by resolution of the village board on or before April 30th, will by default, by law, become the 2015-16 budget. Should the village board fail to adopt a local law to override the property tax cap, the amount of the tax levy in excess of the cap will be required to be placed in escrow and the funds made not available for use in 2015-16. In other words, if you fail to override the cap, but you adopt the budget with the tax rate, anything over that tax levy has to be set aside and cannot be used for programs in the forthcoming year. We estimate this amount to be approximately $2 million. In short, what this means is that if you do not vote for the override of the tax cap prior to adopting the budget, any amount that was over that tax levy will be put into escrow, and you will not have approximately $2 million to run your programs. That means that the village board will have to take action to reduce programs and costs by approximately $2 million. Now, suggestions have been made to reduce the proposed water and sewer rates by certain cost reductions. And while these reductions may be contemplated for the water fund, any additional funds raised with rate increases for the water fund will bring us closer to closing the deficit in that fund. The sewer fund as proposed in 2015-16 does not include any contingency. So any proposed reductions in expenditures in that fund should be used to provide for a contingency. In other words, rather than lowering the rates in the sewer fund, the savings should be used to provide for contingency in the forthcoming year. Now, if the 2015-16 water rates are not adopted by April 24th, we will be forced to issue the May 2015 water and sewer bills at the current rates. Having the additional funds in the May and June 2015 from the rate increases will help us tremendously in addressing the deficits in the water and sewer funds, not to mention the cash flow issues related to these funds that have been there for many years. And one final very important note. All changes to the 2015-16 tentative budget should be adopted no later than Monday, April 27th, so that my office has sufficient time to review and proof the changes and prepare and proof the resolution to adopt the budget, which establishes the appropriations, the estimated revenues other than property taxes, the property tax levy, and the property tax rate. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Can I ask Mike a few questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
That's what we're here for.
Mr. Genito, just can you elaborate a little bit further on the water rate and establishing the new water rate before the May 1st deadline, and how that pertains to the billing cycle, either, I guess, going forward, or does it have to do with the billing that's going out now?
Yeah. Our water bills are issued in May and November. If the water rates are whatever water rates are in effect as of April 24th, that's the period of time when we run the bills. The system actually runs the bills. It requires us to run the rates through the billing system and then proof that, and then print the bills and mail them. So we need that time. We cannot do it, for instance, April 25th, 6th, or later, in order to get the bills out by May for the residents. So it's about the bills that are going out in May of this year, May 2015. So if we don't change the rates by April 24th, the current rates that are in effect will be used to run the bills for May.
You can't delay the billing process by a day or 2 days, or...
No, because they have to be out in the mail by May 1, first-class mail. And it takes time to obviously prepare the bills, run them, proof them, and...
So the bill that will be mailed out on May 1st is reflective of the new rate?
Will be if it's adopted by April 24th.
So you're just indicating on the bill that the new rate going forward from May 1st is higher than the previous year?
That would be correct if you adopt the rate by April 24th, the new rate.
So the bill that the people will be charged will be at the old rate, but they're just being notified that the new rate is in effect?
No.
No.
The people, if we do nothing to change the rates by April 24th, the residents will receive a water bill at the current rates, the old rates. If we adopt the change to the water rates by April 24th, the bill they get in May will reflect the new rates. Will be an amount that reflects the new rates.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank.
On that same note, how much money will the new rates bring in? What is that, like 1% of the budget overall?
Well, first of all, it applies only to the water fund and the
Right.
sewer fund.
Right.
And I don't have that handy as to exactly the amount that it's going to bring in, because we do our budget on a yearly basis. If you give me 1 second, I'll take a look at what we anticipated. So over the course of a year, we're anticipating that's going to bring in about, from the adopted budget of 2015, just about $200,000 a year, so in a half a year, about $100,000.
Thank you.
Mike, we've been taking a look at the water and sewer fees, and after some review and talking with other people, we've come to the conclusion that this can be capped at 5% raise without cutting services or impacting the operation of the water and sewer plants. And I'd like you to ask to make the necessary adjustments to reflect these changes.
You would like me to do what? Make the rates
Change-
5%?
Make the rates at 5%, and we feel we can do that without impacting services or cutting services.
Well, let me explain how the budget process works, and maybe it'll clarify something. The budgets for villages work from the side of appropriations, the side where you need the money to operate. The budgets are prepared by the departments that are responsible for those budgets. In this case, it would be Charles Sawicki for Public Works, and the people that work for him in the water and sewer departments. When they prepared those budgets, they went over all the costs that they needed in the budgets to operate throughout the year. I met with Charles and other people more than once and discussed more than once, went through emails a couple of times to work down to the lowest amount that they think that they could operate within. We did that, and then we look at how much money needs to be raised to cover those costs. That's how we came up with the numbers. As I mentioned earlier, the sewer fund has no contingency. What that means, there's no cushion in the sewer fund, even with the current rate increase. The water fund has a contingency of approximately $240,000, which at a previous meeting, I noted that $100,000 was in there basically to help reduce the deficit. $140,000 is in there to reflect what may be impacting us from the Novartis shutdown. So to establish a rate of 5% and then work backwards and try to cut costs by that amount, don't honestly understand how that would work.
Well, my understanding is that a portion could be cut out of the contingency fees, and that, looking at the budget, unless I'm reading it wrong, there's about 5,300 missing from employee reimbursements of health care that could be applied to that.
5,300?
And you would save 95,000 cut out of the contingency fees. I mean, the bottom line is that I'm not comfortable going to the taxpayers of the village and saying, we're going to raise these astronomical fees. And it's not like we haven't raised them, not us, but the previous administrations have not raised them substantially every year for the past 4 or 5 years. They've raised these things, and always under the assumption that they were building up contingency funds, reducing debt, et cetera. That hasn't happened. So, yeah, I think it's unfair to go to the citizens of the village and say, we're raising your rates 14%, and we're going to do this with it, and try to make up for 10 years of poor budgeting practices, poor employment practice, whatever, all the reasons that contributed to this. So, yes, we feel it can be done with 5%, and I'd like a change to that.
Mr. Morris, can you just give us...
May I
Oh, sure,
address
sure,
a couple
absolutely,
things?
sure.
First of all, one of the things that you have to recognize is that in the budget, even though the budget might have had $1.8 million in fees for the sewer fund, it only brought in about $1.6 million. Now, a lot of this has to do with water and how it's used and how many people, how they use their water. The other thing that you have to recognize, too, is that both of these funds are in deficits. Both of these funds, since 2010 at least, have been borrowing revenue anticipation notes, meaning that even though something was adopted in the budget to pay for it, there wasn't enough money at the end of the year to pay for the operations. And that's been continuing on, as you know, since that date. Again, the budgets were prepared on where we believe the money was needed to pay for the operations for the year. The sewer fund, which is the larger of the two increases in percentage-wise, simply doesn't have the money available, and it doesn't have a cushion of contingency. If we were going to reduce the rate down to 5%, we'd have to reduce further costs down by whatever the equivalent amount of money that is. And I don't know that that can be found in that budget. We've had, again, meetings with the Public Works Department on it. On the water fund side of things, you can certainly look to say we don't need 95,000 in contingency, but now you're leaving nothing to help reduce the deficit, and you're only leaving basically enough money to cover the loss of Novartis.
Well, yes. Well, again, we're back to the argument. I think that any budget can be trimmed further. I'm not an accountant, so I can't get into the nuts and bolts of this here. But we have spoken with accountants who have indicated that this could be reduced. Again, operational costs, well, they may have to be trimmed. That's the department head's business. Non-essential projects will be put off. We're broke. And again, I see no point in, I know I won't, raise taxes to such a dramatic level and fees when, again, I point out that we've raised the fees 5 years in a row or so, and there's no appreciable difference in our debts for those funds. They've only gotten worse. So I can't see where cutting this to 5% is going to have any kind of a dramatic impact. It simply leaves us where we've been for a couple of years. But again, I'm not an accountant. I only know what we can and can't pay, and then it becomes incumbent upon the department heads and Director of Public Works, et cetera, to make the necessary adjustments in their planning and make the changes.
Okay, Mr. Morris, so you're proposing 5%, but you don't have a plan as to how we're going to get to that number, am I correct?
If need be, I'll send you a plan right after this meeting, a written plan for you to
I believe that Mr. Morris would like the treasurer to go back and do the research and try to develop a plan at 5% and see if it's feasible.
Okay, well...
That's what he was alluding to, and I understand Mr. Genito's response also was that we need to find the other cost within that budget. Is that?
That's correct. One of the things that you have to recognize too is that the water and sewer funds are under many regulations from the EPA, the DEC, the New York State Department of Health. Many of the costs that are imposed upon these funds are beyond our control. If we fail to take certain actions or do certain things, expend certain monies, we get fined very expensive fines. And in fact, they may declare at some point that our water is not usable, or perhaps that our sewer fund needs some. For instance, we are under a DEC consent order at this moment to correct certain things in the sewer fund, and we were very happy to be able to negotiate with them to span that across several years as opposed to taking a hit just in the current year.
Right.
And Charles Swick and Terry Rice worked very hard on that, did a very nice job. The problem that you have in these funds is that there are so many mandated costs, and they deal with health and safety, that these are not costs. There isn't a big chunk of money in there for employee travel and entertainment or anything like that. These are really solid costs. And I have been on several meetings with Mr. Sawicki on both of these funds and his supervisors as well. But we can go back again, but I can tell you, working from a 5% on the sewer fund, in my opinion, is not workable, knowing everything I know about that fund after having discussed it with them.
What percent of that budget that you're alluding to now makes up the state mandates and the regulations that you're alluding to? I mean, we're making it sound like, to comply with these state mandates and Board of Health, et cetera, that we're talking 50-60% of a budget. When probably, realistically, without knowing the numbers off the top of my head, I would probably venture to say it's probably 0.5%, if that.
I don't know if Mr. Sawicki has a better idea, or Don, a better idea of what, but all the chemicals that are used in the plant, all of the cleaning that's done in the plant, everything that's related to making sure that our water and sewer is operating in accordance with the regulations.
You're right, and according to our calculations, the impact of the operation of those plants would not be affected by the reduction. Again, we're talking about the safety nets is what we're really talking about. We're not talking about cutting the operations of the
Well,
plant.
the only comment I would make on that, I'll go back and research with Mr. Sawicki and his supervisors once again, but I wish if you or others had worked out some detailed information about these cuts that could have been made, but could have been shared with myself and Mr. Sawicki. And we could have...
You're right.
We could have reviewed that and responded responsibly to...
You're absolutely right, and we didn't finish the calculations until yesterday evening. Again, we're not accountants, so what takes you 20 minutes to do usually probably takes us about 4 hours. But at the conclusion of this meeting, we will fax you over where we feel the changes are, and you can plug them into the budget and make the necessary...
You don't have them with you, Mr. Morris?
No, I don't.
So
Not
we're
that's
having a
readable.
working meeting. Why do you not have this information available for the treasurer?
Well, I might ask you to
It's
say
for the treasurer.
Okay, but he should have had that. I was in here at 7 o'clock this morning.
You're right. I might ask you the same question, why the DPW can't tell me what the mandated costs are for the budget. That should be a fairly simple...
You're asking me that question?
No.
Now?
I'm asking you why, we asked the DPW, how much percentage of your budget is because to comply with local laws or state laws?
I don't have a definitive percentage, and I don't know if it really can be outlined in such a way, because it's essentially all-inclusive. I mean, you either comply or you don't comply. I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. There's a series of compliance issues that are necessary, and it's all-inclusive. We could go sit down and try to analyze a percentage. I don't have anything for you right now, but it's...
I'm led to believe that there are certain costs mandated by the Board of Health, by the state DEC, et cetera, et cetera. Those fees don't change or change dramatically.
Yeah. Well, for example, I could give you one quick example for the water department. The Rockland County Health Department regulates our water department as well as the New York State Health Department. There are certain mandated manpower requirements, also licenses, certain amount of licenses in certain categories, and then also in terms of being able to respond, for example, again, for the water department, to be able to respond for a water main break in a certain time frame. So there's a lot of things that off the surface may not be very obvious, but there are a lot of things that come into play. And again, the water department as well as the wastewater treatment facility has a lot of regulatory issues. There are inspections, periodic inspections that do require us to maintain a certain level at the wastewater treatment plant. I can let Donna's here, I can let him go into a little bit more granular detail. You want to speak on?
Sure. Just so that you understand, mandated costs are one thing, but there's mandated costs that are not mandated as direct costs. For instance, we have, by inspection, to maintain a certain maintenance log, maintenance duties, maintenance schedules. All maintenance costs money. Oil, grease, parts, all cost money. We can't trim that because as soon as a piece of equipment is down and we haven't done that, the village will get fined. All right? And for every parameter that we fail to meet, $32,000 a day per parameter. That's what you risk when you don't take care of these items. And as Charles said, it's all inclusive. The state monitors our operation in its entirety. So many of these, almost all of these things are not choices. There's only certain things the state really allows us to have choices on. And we've exercised as much of that as we can to minimize the cost as much as we can. But you're still mandated to operate the plant in its full operation. You can't even have equipment out of service. You are required to have a timeline to return it to service, have it operational. There is no choices. The DEC does not allow us choices. And the mayor, having met with the DEC with us, understands very, very succinctly how the DEC feels about us maintaining our operation.
Okay. Well, once again, we're not suggesting that you cut the operations, which all of that should have been budgeted in, I'm sure. Where we're proposing cuts is in the contingency fees and in two other areas. It's difficult for me to explain, not being an accountant, but I have it written down and we'll type it up and give it to Mike immediately after the meeting. And we're simply asking him to plug in the numbers. And we believe that we'll find that we're not impacting the operation or maintenance of any of the plants.
Okay, Mr. Morris, could you just elaborate on who we are?
Well, Ed and I had discussed it, and Frank had discussed it.
Okay, so you're all in agreement with this 5%?
We are exploring the possibility of reducing the rate. If Mr. Genito goes back and tries to calculate or recalculate the findings, the increase, we would be interested in reviewing that.
Okay.
And I would also like to know is, in the rate reduction that is proposed in the tentative changes, is where were those reductions found in the sewer fund and the water fund? If you can provide the detail to us, which I requested but did not receive, I would like to see that.
I'm sorry, you requested the reductions in the sewer?
The details, in the details in all the budgets to see where the reductions took place, where it was changed.
Who did you?
Wait, I emailed that out yesterday.
I have it.
This?
The red line version you asked for.
This?
You asked for a red line version
Correct.
of the budget. And I said it's produced in Excel, it doesn't lend itself to red line.
Right, it's a track change document.
I'm sorry?
It's a tracked change
No, I
document.
understand what you're saying.
Okay.
But Excel doesn't lend itself to that, Word does. What I did for the board.
Excel does.
What I did for the board was list the column of the tentative budget, the
Right.
column of the proposed changes, and the amended amount.
but it's not detailed. The detail does not support the document.
What detail would you
The
like?
detail of whatever change you made to reduce the percentage in the sewer fund or water fund or general fund.
Well, we don't have the water or sewer. We do have it for the general. We didn't do any, as I said, there weren't any changes that I applied to the sewer or water because
How did we reduce the rate from the sewer from 14.4 to 11.2?
I didn't do that.
No? Okay.
That wasn't me.
Well, that was reduced, though. We have an email.
Well, you may have
No,
come up with
I
something.
got enough trouble reducing once. No, that
No,
wasn't
I
us.
did not publish any document showing a reduction in...
Ed, do you have?
So the sewer remains at 14.4%.
No. Wait a minute. Hold on, I have that. Hold on. I have it. Here we go. I know you have a spreadsheet, it was on a spreadsheet.
Potentially 1.65%, why would I raise that rate 15, 14, 22, and 20%? Come on. That's a count. Yeah,
That was at 14.
All right, so you want one for the water and the sewer like that as well?
Well,
But
they-
the one
they-
for the water and the, I'm sorry.
Did we reduce the sewer rate by the, down to 11.2? Did you?
The sewer rate was an 11.2%.
Right. So that, they started off at 12.2%. Now they're reduced to 11.2, and all I'm asking for is the detail of what was changed.
Right, but once again, those were the changes that I suggested the board should not make because of the issues with the water and the sewer department.
That's what it would be reduced down to with the changes that I had proposed and given him.
Okay, so that was unclear.
Hang on, let me finish. I worked with each department in getting them down 10% or as close to 10% as they possibly could without jeopardizing two things, safety and operations. They did come up with some monies that fell into those categories and they submitted them to Mike. That did drop it down. However, if you look, Mike strongly suggested that even though it came down by, what was it?
3%.
3%, let's just say, it's not exact, but 3%, he did not recommend in any way that we should drop the sewer rates. We should remain them the same for the reasons that he's stated today with regards to planning for the future of this village in contingency and not having to have to go back to the borrowing that we have felt accustomed to
Correct.
for far too long. So that's why he's saying to you, yes, we found more ways to reduce the budget, but he strongly recommends that we leave the rate the same in preparing for the future of the village. So we're not at a 22.8% tax hike. You've now invested in your village, you have planned for the future of this village, and you're not working on a budget which completely wipes out your expenses with no plan going forward.
Okay, but it is on the proposed
yes.
draft unadopted changes. It is reflected in the document.
Correct, with a message from Mike.
Okay.
Strongly suggesting that we do not reduce it down to the 11% due to the things we discussed already.
Well, I think we've
Okay. So
come to the
you've
point.
asked.
we-
Go ahead.
Immediately after this meeting, I will give Mike a written directions of how we want the changes made, so that you can read it from my scribblings, you'll never make it. But we will, like I say, immediately after the meeting, we'll have it to you. We'd like you to plug in the numbers and see where we stand.
It's just a shame that you haven't worked with the treasurer on this and you've worked with outside people and not included the treasurer into these meetings. It really would have been more time efficient in the fact that we have a budget coming up so close.
At this point, I really don't appreciate your sermonizing
I'm
to
just
me or
saying-
any member of the board.
It's not
Yeah,
sermonizing.
well, it's actually
It's-
being rude. You want to have a
it's not.
professional conversation, then we'll have it.
is very professional,
But
and I
don't
wish you would have acted
editorialize and run
accordingly,
for
Mr.
office.
Morris.
Well, don't run for office now.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Genito?
Mike, I have one other question regarding the deficits in all the funds. So start with the water fund and the sewer fund. What is the total current deficit that we have?
I had given that to you in a memo
Right.
earlier. I don't have that.
You don't
handy
have
with me,
it.
But
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Is there anything else from the board? Any questions for Mr. Genito? Nothing. Okay. Mike, why don't you just give them a little update on where you are so that we're all on the same page? Because I think you're the only one that we don't have any final...
Trish, thanks for taking the time out to meet myself and Chief Salmon Monday night. We were able to identify, well, our budget is about $440,000. I believe $442,000 to be exact. $140,000 of that is for the LoSAP payment. That's the length of service award payment for the firefighters. There's a lot of costs in our budget that are not controlled by us. Telephone for both firehouses, electric, gas for both firehouses, motor vehicle fuel, motor vehicle repairs and maintenance, and the associated cost with the NFPA and OSHA requirements, which doesn't leave us much money to cut from. I understand that we wanted to cut 10%, which is about $44,000. We've been able to identify somewhere in the area of $22,000 that we believe could be cut from this year's budget. We have to go back and do some more work. We may be able to get that up a little bit higher, but I can't see it going over $25,000.
Okay, thanks, Mike, I appreciate it, and if you could get that to me as soon as you have it all figured out. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I have not asked the fire department to consider any cuts in their budget that would be safety to the public or themselves. So, Mike, I thank you for you guys taking the time to try to do the best you can in cutting down the budget.
You're welcome. You'll have the final numbers today.
Thank you so much. Okay. Is there any other department heads that can give any other information that would be helpful to the board? Okay. Is there any questions from the board as to any of the departments making any other adjustments in their budget?
No, well, as most of you know, the state auditors have been in here for the past couple of weeks, and we expect to have their final report today, tomorrow, what have you. We are waiting to read the final report, and we want to make sure, understand we're under the controller's vision right now, and everything we do from here on in is going to be viewed by the state controller and reviewed to make sure that our budgets are accurate, they're sound, they're physically responsible. Again, I'm not an accountant. Nobody here is an accountant except Mike. We're waiting for that report. He's analyzing the current budget, and we'd like to see that. It's whether or not the state thinks that there needs to be structural changes to the budget, or exactly the status of where we are. I know it seems like we're stalling, and again, we're certainly not stalling. We know a budget has to be passed, and we will get a budget passed on time. But I think that for us to pass a budget that the state is going to find lacking in some areas doesn't make any sense. It's part of the problems of doing things like that that got us, the village, into the trouble that it's in right now. So we do expect to have the state controller's budget report, And as soon as we get it in our hands, we will review it. Mike, I'm sure will have a copy of it, and we'll sit down with him and work out a final budget.
I just want to make the board aware that this morning I contacted the State Controller's Office to see when that report may be issued. The gentleman that was here doing it was not available. He was in the field. We're expecting a call back from him. But the word that I heard from them was it normally takes some time. There's a process that now that they've completed their field work, they go back to the office, they run it through a review process, and it could be several days or even weeks. Again, I'm expecting that call back, but I wouldn't count on having that report or even a draft of it here by April 30th.
All right, well, we contacted State Controller's Office too, and you're right, he was out yesterday. Today we didn't contact him, but we're also expecting. And naturally, listen, if it's not going to be ready, but we were led to believe that it would be ready. But if it's not ready, then we'll deal with the issues as they stand. If the final audit is ready, then I think it behooves all of us to look at it, and if changes need to be made according to the State Controller's Office, we should, address those concerns that they might have.
It's interesting that you say that, Mr. Morris, because one of the things that, when I finally got all of the reports from the State Controller's Office, one of the things they identify is the water and sewer fund. Am I correct, Mr. Genito?
Yes.
And the deficit in there, and that it has not been addressed, and it has not been moved forward to try to reduce that deficit. So, it's interesting that you say that you're waiting for their opinion, because we have that opinion already. That's something that we already know, and we should use that opinion to our benefit, already using that knowledge to go forward. And I think, Mike, you've presented a sound plan. I'm very, very happy with the plan. I thank all of the department heads. I thank all of the supervisors. I think you have done more than your share in trying to reduce the costs to run your departments, keeping, again, operations running and safety at the top of that list. So I want to thank all of you. My hopes today was that we would have all of our questions asked, as we all are here, and this is the time to ask them, and that we'd have some resolution as to the changes that we need to be made. You have to understand the Treasurer's Office has to prepare all of these changes. A resolution has to be made for each one of these changes. Those resolutions have to be passed by the board before they can be included into the budget. Therefore, if we do not have those resolutions and this budget is not voted on by April 30th to take effect May 1st, the budget will stand as it is in the tentative budget. So I want everyone to understand that. I guess there's no more questions. I'm sure that means the trustees have the answers to all of their questions. I hope moving forward they will work more closely with Mr. Genito in including him in the information that they've had in a more timely fashion. And I thank everyone for coming today.
Do we have any other questions?
I said no, I asked.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
I just have a request, actually, for Mike, just to, if that's going to be possible, to provide me with the details of the total budget, the tentative budget that was prepared and distributed on March 20th, and then the revised budget with the changes and the detail to back it up, along with the current deficits in each fund. I would appreciate that.
Mr. Markunas, I just want to let you know, I actually sat down with both budgets and already computed all of that. I would have hoped you have done the same.
I did, but I would like to have the backup from the treasurer.
And I also spoke to each one of the department heads and asked them exactly what the cuts were.
Okay,
So
but
you can
just
do
to
that.
provide the detail.
Okay, if you can do that, though, just to let you know, you can speak to the department heads, and they'd be happy to furnish you with a list of...
I would like it furnished by the treasurer.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, thanks, everybody.